I stood quietly in the shadow cast by my sister's brilliance, where my parents' eyes had never truly seen me, blinded by the flawless grades and proud achievements I struggled so hard to earn. My dreams of college, once nurtured with hope, were swept aside by a cruel sentence. We only have enough money for your sister, Sophie Clara. You'll have to manage on loans. That night, their words cut through me like a blade tearing open a wound I would never forget. And from that very moment, I vowed to carve a path for myself, to step into a world where the invisible could rise and challenge, where truth, no matter how painful, would become the sharpest weapon I owned. Before we dive into this gripping story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. And leave a comment to let us know where you're watching from. My name is Clara Bennett, and at 25, I never thought that my college graduation would turn into a battleground where my innermost pains would need to be addressed. The white picket fence of our suburban Ohio home shone in the summer sun, a false promise of harmony. But inside it, my parents, Thomas and Margaret Bennett, had woven a web of favoritism that left me broken. Thomas, a careful financial analyst, and Margaret, a respected professor of literature, created a comfortable middle-class lifestyle with their steady incomes protecting us from poverty. But their love was a currency that was unequally spent. My younger sister, Sophie, 2 years my junior, was their shining star. Her auburn curls and effortless brilliance reflecting their aspirations, while I, with my quiet resolve and wild dreams, was cast into the background. From childhood, the disparity stung like nettles. Sophie's ballet recitals drew both parents their applause, a symphony, while my poetry readings earned a hurried nod from Margaret if I was fortunate. Poetry's a lovely pastime. Clara Thomas would say his voice clipped, but it won't secure a future. Christmas mornings laid bare the chasm. Sophie unwrapped gleaming gadgets and dance costumes, her laughter filling the house, while I clutched hand-me-down books or clearance rack sweaters. Sophie needs nurturing for her gifts. Margaret would murmur, her eyes avoiding mine. At 10, I learned to choke back tears, my hurt a silent river, but my grandmother Beatrice saw me. Her farmhouse nestled by a Michigan lake was my refuge, where we'd paint sunsets and read tales of trailblazers. Your heart sees the world differently, Clara. She'd whisper, her voice a balm. Never let them dim your fire. Those summers sowed dreams of proving my worth, of rising beyond the confines of my parents' narrow gaze. When I won a statewide entrepreneurship contest at the age of 15, my teacher, Ms. Harper, called home with pride as she said, "Clara's plan was exceptional." Margaret's response was a tepid, "That's nice. Did Sophie finish her debate prep? Do you think she finished?" The rejection was more painful than I had anticipated, but I persisted, working nights at a bookshop to save money for a future I felt I would have to create on my own. My 4.0 GPA shone a silent protest, and Sophie's debate victories earned expensive dinners and fanfare from parents. We were both accepted to the prestigious Crestwood University, and when our letters arrived the same day, I tore mine open, my heart racing. I got in, full acceptance to the business school. I cried over dinner, my voice shaking with excitement. Thomas hardly looked up. "Good work, Clara," he murmured, his tone bland. A few moments later, Sophie rushed in, waving her acceptance letter for Crestwood's political science program. She sobbed, and as the room exploded and Margaret wrapped her arms around her, while Thomas toasted her genius, my victory vanished into their festivities, a footnote in their story. "We must talk about college," Thomas said, clearing his throat at a rare family dinner with phones stowed. His gaze remained fixed on Sophie. "We've saved for your education since you were born. Crestwood's tuition is steep, but we'll cover it so you can focus on your studies." Sophie glowed, her smile radiant. I waited, my breath shallow, expecting my turn. The silence stretched like a cold weight until I spoke. "What about my tuition?" Thomas sighed. "Clara, we only have enough for one. Sophie's shown exceptional promise. Her degree will yield a stronger return." Margaret reached for me, her touch intended to calm me, and said, "You're so independent, you can manage with loans or perhaps start at a community college." The words that followed burned in my soul. "She's earned it, Clara. You haven't." My voice was small, but it cracked the air. My fork clattered to the plate, sounding like a gunshot in my ears, and my parents' faces blurred as the verdict sank in. 17 years of hard work, perfect grades awards, and late nights spent studying while working amounted to nothing, and I felt unworthy of my parents' investment. "How could you save for her and not me?" my parents asked as the room tilted. Thomas folded his napkin and said, "We made practical choices, Clara. Sophie's path is clear. Your dreams are uncertain." Margaret added, "Loans are common. You'll manage." Their dismissal and certainty shattered something deep inside of me, and I ran to my room, the door locking behind me. I cried for the love they denied, the faith they withheld, and the fact that I was their daughter, but invisible, not just for the money. I drove to Beatrice's the following morning, and the 2-hour drive was a blur of anger and grief. I told her everything: the acceptance, the dinner, their cruel calculus. She listened, her eyes fierce, her hands clasping mine, and she said, wiping away my tears, "My sweet girl. Their blindness is their failure, not yours. You have a spirit they can't fathom. Go to Crestwood. Prove them wrong, not for them, but for you." Her words gave me a resolve I didn't realize I had. Beatrice couldn't provide money, and her pension barely kept her afloat, but her faith was a lifeline. That night, I vowed to attend Crestwood, to persevere in the face of their betrayal, to graduate, and to rise above their doubts. Once I returned home, I dedicated myself to researching grants, loans, and scholarships. My guidance counselor, Ms. Larson, stayed up late helping me with my applications, saying, "Your determination is rare, Clara." With federal loans and a private one co-signed by Beatrice, I managed to scrape together enough money for my first year. But housing was another obstacle. Sophie would live in luxurious campus dorms paid for by our parents, while I found a small apartment 40 minutes away, shared with 3 strangers. I got 2 jobs, a morning shift at a cafe and weekends at a library. The contrast was striking. Thomas and Margaret bought Sophie a laptop, clothes, and dorm decor, throwing a lavish send-off party. And I packed my life into suitcases from thrift stores, my car groaning under the weight. Margaret gave me a faded quilt the night before I left, saying, "For your bed," in a hesitant voice. That was the only hint that I was leaving. On the day of move-in, they drove Sophie to campus with her belongings filling their SUV, and I followed in my rattling sedan, its engine coughing. No one checked to see if it was roadworthy, and they hugged Sophie at Crestwood's gates, Margaret calling after me, "Good luck, Clara, I hope it works out." Her uncertainty was a fire. My apartment was a shock-leaking pipes, thin walls, and the constant hum of traffic. That first night alone on a sagging mattress, fear began to creep in. Will the strain break me? I dried my tears and mapped out a harsh schedule: study, work, sleep, repeat, after my phone lit up, and Beatrice sent me a beacon text that said, "You're forged in fire, Clara. Shine." My mission had begun, not just to graduate, but to recover my value from the ashes of their treachery. The Crestwood campus was ablaze with fall foliage and leaves that glowed like embers against the gray stone buildings. But my world was a grindstone that honed me through unrelenting days. The thin walls of my apartment reverberated with the voices of strangers, arguments, laughter, and the clatter of dishes, while I set aside time for studying, getting up early to read economics texts before rushing to the cafe. The hiss of the espresso machine became my rhythm, keeping my hands steady despite restless nights. Weekends at the library offered a more laid-back environment, allowing me to store books and learn formulas with my mind tense and focused. Sophie's life, seen through posters of her debate victories on campus, was a faraway star. Sorority galas, visits from parents, a smooth path. Each step on my path defied the words, haunting me. "She's earned it, Clara. You haven't." My schedule was a warrior's dance with every hour claimed. Mornings started at 5, study sessions were squeezed in, before cafe shifts classes were a whirlwind of notes scribbled in margins, and library work continued until the quiet of midnight. Sleep was a thief, giving me 4 hours if I was lucky. And my business classes weren't just lessons, they were mirrors reflecting my life's calculus of scarcity and ambition. After a lecture, Professor Langston, my accounting instructor, paused me and said, "Your analysis of cost allocation was incisive, Clara." His eyes sharp. "You understand constraint in a way your peers don't." His words were kindling, stoking a fire I hadn't named. My roommate Nora, a biology major with a sharp sense of humor, saw my fraying edges, and one night while I was sleeping over my laptop, she left a bowl of stew labeled Clara's Fuel. Her generosity broke through my guarded heart. "You're killing yourself," she said, spilling tea across our chipped table. "Let me help," I confided, and her face hardened. "That behavior isn't familial. It's abandonment. You have support now." Nora became my anchor, proofreading essays and giving me quizzes, and her meals were a quiet rebellion against my hunger. "We're kin by choice," she said, her smile fierce. Her support, like Beatrice's, was a thread tightening my resolve. A storm hit in the middle of the semester, and the cafe cut hours, because it was the slow season, which reduced my income by a third. My budget, a fragile web, collapsed. Rent loomed, tuition payments taunted, and panic clawed my chest. But I remembered Ms. Larson's faith, so I scheduled an urgent meeting with Ms. Torres, the financial aid officer. Her office was filled with student files, and it felt like a confessional. I told her I was drowning, exposing my financial situation. She looked at my grades with a furrowed brow and said, "Your 4.0 is remarkable under this pressure, and Professor Langston recommends you for a research assistant role that pays better than the cafe." The relief I felt lifted me out of my gloom. The research position, which focused on studying small business survival, fit my schedule perfectly, and its intellectual spark provided a soothing contrast to my previous job of steaming milk. I examined statistics on businesses that were prospering in spite of shortages with Professor Langston, and I found that their tactics resonated with my own life. Have you thought about entrepreneurship? I started a side project, a virtual assistant service for local businesses using skills from a marketing elective. Nights blurred as I built a website and crafted service packages, my laptop a canvas for ambition. By spring, my service had 3 clients, enough to quit the library job. Although the income was small, it belonged to me and represented a triumph that I achieved through my own efforts. He asked one evening, his voice thoughtful, "Your insights on resource optimization are rare." Inspiring dreams from Beatrice's library books of visionaries who turned nothing into empires. We rarely met, our lives running parallel to each other. Sophie's bright voice invited me to a sorority event, but I turned her down because I was uncompromising. We talked about the weather, and our classes never delving into the depths of our parents' decision. Thomas and Margaret called her once a week, their voices warm on her phone. I called her during the holidays briefly and formally asking how school was. Their silence on my Dean's List award, which was displayed on Crestwood's website, was a familiar hurt, but it fueled me. At Thanksgiving, Margaret questioned in a faraway tone, "Fine," and I swallowed the reality of my 60-hour weeks. I wasn't their daughter in those moments. I was Clara, creating my own name. Beatrice's letters came in like holy books, her handwriting steady. "You're leaving a legacy, my girl," she wrote. "Not for them, but for the world." I pinned her words above my desk, a constellation directing me. Ms. Torres checked in her concern, a silent strength. "You're defying odds," she said, authorizing a second grant. My grades remained stable, my business expanded, and in the silence of my apartment, I started to see myself not as the neglected child, but as a woman chiseling a mountain out of stone. The pain of my parents' betrayal didn't go away, but it changed like a coal pressed into a diamond. "You've won more than you've lost," Nora said firmly one night as I was staring at a scholarship rejection with burning eyes. She pointed to my client list, my grade reports, and the life I'd wrested from nothing. Her words echoed Beatrice's, a chorus of belief, and I applied for more scholarships, my essays raw with my story. Won the Crestwood Resilience Award, came through, covering half of my sophomore tuition. The notification arrived on a snowy day, and I could tell I was enough. The girl who had wept at their dismissal had vanished, replaced by a woman whose fire blazed brighter than their uncertainty. The journey was far from over, but I was ready, my spirit a blade, my resolve a river flowing toward a horizon they couldn't see. As freshman year came to an end, I stood taller, my roots deeper. Sophie's world of ease, a distant echo, her path no longer my measure. I packed for summer, returning to Beatrice's, where we'd paint and plan. Thomas and Margaret's voices praising Sophie's internship barely touched me. The summer sun painted Beatrice's farmhouse gold, its weathered boards serving as a canvas for our dreams. I spent days by the lake with my paintbrush, following the dance of the water, my heart releasing to her steady wisdom. "You're growing into your power, Clara," she said, her eyes like deep pools. "Not to spite them, but to honor your spirit." Her words were roots securing me as I got ready for my second year at Crestwood. My visits to my parents' house were short, their white fence a hollow symbol, and their conversation about Sophie's summer internship was a distant hum. I nodded my smile, a mask my soul, already back at the university, where my virtual assistant service was attracting new clients. My bank account, though thin, was mine, a silent defiance of their judgment. "She's earned it, Clara. You haven't." At Crestwood, the campus was alive with the renewal of fall, but my life was more tightly wound. I spent late nights studying data with Professor Langston, and our research on small business resilience mirrored my own struggle for survival. My business expanded, now serving 6 local shops, and their faith in my work provided a comfort against the cold of my parents' dismissal. Nora was a constant source of support, her laughter shielding me from exhaustion. One evening, she pulled me to a campus bonfire, and she teased, "You need a spark beyond work," as she thrust a marshmallow stick into my hand. The flames reminded me of Beatrice's fire, and I allowed myself to breathe, if only briefly. My grades remained strong, a 4.0 forged in discipline, and Professor Langston invited me to co-author a paper. He said in a warm voice, "Your perspective on scarcity-driven innovation is unique." The honor stunned me, and seeing my name on a publication was a dream I had not dared to voice. I immersed myself in the work, managing it alongside my classes and business. My body felt strained, yet my spirit reached new heights. The Crestwood Resilience Award was renewed for my sophomore year, which relieved the burden of tuition. Ms. Torres, assessing my progress, grinned and said, "You're rewriting what's possible, Clara." Her faith, akin to that of Nora and Beatrice, provided me with unwavering support. A crack appeared in the middle of the semester when Sophie, who is usually a distant shimmer, knocked on my apartment door with a pale face and said, "I'm failing my political theory course," in a trembling voice. "My professor says my arguments lack rigor. I might not pass," she said. Her vulnerability was new, a breach in her golden armor. A part of me, scarred by years of being favored, wanted to turn away and let her taste failure. But another part of me, shaped by Beatrice's compassion, saw a sister, not a rival. "Come in," I said, clearing my cluttered table. We went over her notes, my research skills sharpening her hazy ideas. As we studied, she asked, "How do you manage it all? Your company flawless scores this study." After a moment of hesitation, I told Sophie, "I've had to make sacrifices, Sophie. I work 60 hours a week, skip meals, and live on loans because Mom and Dad chose you over me." Her eyes widened in horror, and she whispered, "I didn't know it was that hard." The admission didn't erase the past, but it broke the silence between us. As our study sessions grew to be weekly, Sophie started to see how much I was burdened and asked more pointed questions such as, "Why didn't you tell me they didn't save for you?" One evening, in a quiet voice, she inquired, "Would it have changed anything?" I shrugged. The words felt heavy, a truth we'd never named. Sophie's guilt was a silent shadow, but I didn't ease it. My pain was mine to bear, not hers to erase. Nevertheless, she warmed up, and her invitations to campus events became more sincere. I turned them down most of the time, my schedule uncompromising, but her effort was a seed slowly sprouting. I hired a classmate, Liam, to handle social media for 2 clients. His enthusiasm was a spark. The money stabilized my rent, allowing me to buy proper groceries. This was a small victory. Professor Langston's paper was accepted at a regional conference with my name alongside his. I presented our findings, my voice steady, before a room of scholars. The applause was a river washing away doubts. My classmates started asking me for advice. My once invisible presence now a quiet force. Thomas and Margaret's calls remained infrequent, and their silence during my conference felt like a familiar sting. However, I no longer sought their gaze. When a storm brewed late in the year, my car's engine failed, leaving me stranded. Repairs devoured my savings, endangering the delicate balance of my budget. Nora came over and lent me her bike, saying fiercely, "We'll figure it out." I applied for an emergency scholarship, and Ms. Torres secured it with an essay that was honest about my journey. Her firm voice said, "You're not slipping, Clara. Keep climbing." The money paid for the repairs, but the scare sharpened my focus, and I pitched my agency to a larger client, a local bakery chain. Their contract doubled my revenue, allowing me to hire another student. My business transformed from a mere side project to a dynamic entity thriving alongside my aspirations. Beatrice came to visit at the end of the semester, her slender body wrapped in a shawl. We walked the paths of Crestwood, her pride a silent son. "You're building a world they can't imagine," she said, her hand squeezing mine. I showed her my published paper and my agency's website, and as her eyes glistened, she said, "This is your legacy, Clara, not their judgment." Her words served as a shield as I faced summer. Thomas and Margaret planned a family vacation to commemorate Sophie's junior year, but they did not extend an invitation to me. The exclusion was a dull ache, but I chose Beatrice's lake where I would work remotely and paint. My parents' world was getting smaller, their vision too limited for the woman I was becoming. I was at a crossroads as my sophomore year came to an end. My agency was flourishing, my academics were unwavering, and my bond with Sophie was tentative but growing. The pain of my parents' betrayal was a scar rather than a wound, and I was no longer the girl who pleaded for their love. Instead, I was Clara, a weaver of her destiny, with roots deep in the ground and a fire that reached for the stars. The horizon was wide with a river carving stone, a flame that would not go out. The winds of my junior year at Crestwood were sharper than ever, like blades sharpened by the hardships of previous seasons. My digital marketing agency was now thriving, serving 10 clients throughout Ohio, its roots spreading through my unrelenting labor. I hired 3 students, Liam, Aisha, and Mateo, whose talents blended into my vision. The income stabilized my life, paying the rent and loans and even permitting small repayments. A silent victory over the shadow of my parents' words. "She earned it, Clara. You haven't." My apartment, a hollow shell, turned into a hearth, and Nora's laughter and shared meals were a salve, but the weight of my journey pressed heavy. My body exhausted my spirit. Fierce, but stretched thin. My studies were blazing bright, a 4.0 marked a sacrifice. Professor Langston, who is now my mentor, nominated me for the Crestwood Entrepreneurial Spirit Award, a scholarship that would cover my junior year tuition. "Your agency's growth is a case study in resilience," he said, his voice a steady drum. The award ceremony held in the university's grand hall was a rare moment of pause. I stood in a borrowed dress, my heart thumping as Dean Carver called my name. The applause was overwhelming, yet my gaze shifted to Beatrice, who was watching through a shaky video call, her smile shining brightly through the screen. Thomas and Margaret were not there, their silence a familiar wound. Sophie attended, her presence a fragile thread. "I'm proud of you," she whispered, her words tentative but warm. Although our bond was growing, it resembled a sapling struggling to thrive in rocky soil. Professor Langston encouraged me to enter the National Collegiate Entrepreneurship Competition, which loomed with its $50,000 prize as a beacon. He said, "Your agency's focus on rural businesses is innovative," and I spent nights honing my pitch using data from actual clients and telling my story honestly about my struggles. The competition's first round, judged online, passed in a blur, but my submission advanced, giving me hope. However, the second round required me to travel to Chicago, which was beyond my means. Nora rallied classmates to raise money, and their donations, along with a university grant, sent me to the city. And my presentation, delivered with a voice forged in fire, earned a finalist spot. The news reached Crestwood, a campus headline, but Thomas and Margaret's silence was a cold stone. Sophie's world started to fall apart. Her senior thesis, a political science capstone, revealed her limitations. Years of parental protection had left her unprepared for its rigor. One evening, she came to my apartment with tears in her eyes, confessing, "I might not graduate," her voice like a broken reed. "My advisor says my research is shallow." The old wound flared. Her preferred path had been theirs, not mine, but I saw her fear, a mirror to my own past doubts. "We'll fix it," I said steadily. We revised her thesis, my research skills a blade sharpening her work. As we worked, she said, "I've been blind, Clara. I thought you were fine, but you've carried so much alone." Her guilt was raw, a crack in her golden facade. I didn't absolve her, but I listened. "I had to survive," I said. "You didn't see because they didn't let you." The bakery chain, a major client of mine, threatened to leave, citing budget cuts. Their loss would destroy my revenue, so I met with their owner, a worn-out woman named Ellen, and presented a new plan, targeted ads to increase holiday sales, and she signed a renewed contract saying, "You've got grit." The victory was hard-won, and my team's late nights served as a testament to our efforts. Aisha's designs, Mateo's analytics, and Liam's posts felt like family, with their faith in me igniting a fire within. The agency's growth attracted attention, and a local paper featured us with the headline, "Crestwood Student Builds Marketing Empire." I sent Beatrice the clipping, and she responded with a poem. "Your roots break stone, Clara. Your wings touch stars." Although I expected my parents' silence, it felt like a dull ache. As the competition's final round approached, my nerves were tense. Sophie, who is now a quiet ally, helped me rehearse with sharp feedback saying, "You're unstoppable," with earnest eyes. The Chicago stage was large, the judges' faces were stern, and I talked about my agency, my clients' dreams, and my own ascent from the ashes of betrayal. The applause was thunderous, and my heart pounded with excitement. A few days later, the call came. I'd won. The $50,000 prize was a lifeline, but the national exposure was a crown. Crestwood's newspaper splashed my face across its front page. My story was a beacon. Thomas and Margaret called, their voices stiff. "Congratulations, Clara," Margaret said. "We saw the article." Their words felt like ash arriving too late to provide any warmth. Dean Carver called me her office a haven of books and said, "Your journey is extraordinary," in a warm voice. "We'd like you to speak at graduation representing the business school," she said. The honor was overwhelming, its peak dizzying, and I accepted it, my voice steady but my heart racing. The speech would be my truth spoken before thousands of people, including my parents. The prospect was both a wound and a weapon. Sophie texted, "You deserve this." Her words a gentle rain. Our relationship had changed, her guilt giving way to respect, and she started to decline gifts from her parents. "I aspire to be independent just like you," she expressed, selecting a mirror. Beatrice's health deteriorated, her letters slowed, and her voice grew thinner during phone conversations. "I'm worn out, my girl," she confessed. "But my heart's with you." I organized a visit, my agency stable enough for a weekend away, and Nora insisted, "Go. We'll hold the fort." Nora's loyalty was unwavering, like a river. My parents arranged a pre-graduation dinner for Sophie, and their unintentional invitation to me came as a surprise. "If you're free," Thomas casually said. The exclusion hurt, but I chose Beatrice's lake, where truth resided. As junior year came to an end, I stood taller, my agency a forest. My speech, a storm brewing, the scar from the betrayal, was slight, my fire ablaze. I was Clara, a weaver of stars, prepared to face the dawn of my reckoning. The spring of my senior year at Crestwood opened up like a river through stone, its currents carrying me toward a horizon I'd carved from dreams. My digital marketing agency flourished its branches, providing shelter to 15 clients, and their trust resonated deeply in my heart. Liam, Aisha, and Mateo, now joined by Priya, have woven their talents into our work, their laughter a fire in our small office. The $50,000 soldiers from the National Collegiate Entrepreneurship Competition had sparked growth, allowing me to hire full-time, pay fair wages, and pay off a portion of my loans. The scar of my parents' betrayal. "She's earned it, Clara. You haven't," was a faint line, its pain forged into strength. My academic career took off, and I received a 4.0 in Starlight. Dean Carver invited me to speak at graduation, and I wrote my speech in stolen moments. My words were a river of resilience rather than retaliation. Professor Langston read it, his eyes glistening, and said, "This will shake them, Clara," adding, "Not with anger, but with your light." The business school was abuzz with my story, and my agency was featured in a national magazine called Rising Star Crestwood's Self-Made Entrepreneur. The magazine cover featured my story, and I mailed a copy to Beatrice, who responded with a trembling voicemail. My girl, you've built a world. Her voice weak was a drumbeat pushing me forward, and Thomas and Margaret's silence on the article was a hollow echo, their world too small for my fire. Sophie's transformation became more profound. Our late nights saved her thesis securing her graduation, but now her eyes peered beyond her golden cage. She joined a nonprofit that promotes educational equity, and her decision was a quiet rebellion. I want to make a difference like you, she told me in an earnest voice. We met once a week, and our conversations stopped being surface level. I'm sorry I didn't see your struggle sooner, she said, her hands twisting, and I nodded. You see now, that's enough. Our sisterhood, which had been a fragile sprout, turned into a sturdy oak with roots entwined with truth. She turned down a parental gift, a car, saying, I'll earn my own, like Clara. Her words served as a mirror reflecting my defiance. Beatrice's health deteriorated after a storm in April, and she suffered a stroke that took away her strength. I drove to her lake house with a clenched fist in my heart, and she lay in bed with her eyes still fierce. She whispered, Don't mourn me yet. And her hand was weak in mine. Your speech is my victory, I said, and I spent a weekend painting by her bedside, my tears blending with colors. Nora ran the agency, and her texts were a lifeline. We've got this. Go love her. Beatrice gave me a locket which was silver and said, For a woman who breaks stone, and I wore it as a talisman as I made my way back to Crestwood, my resolve a blade. Dean Carver pulled me aside during the hectic graduation rehearsal, saying, Your introduction will be special, with a mysterious smile. Trust the moment, I nodded, my nerves a knot in my stomach. The previous evening, my parents had thrown a lavish dinner for Sophie at their rental house, which was packed with family. Margaret texted me, Join if you can. And I accepted, choosing Nora's apartment. We toasted with cheap wine, and Sophie slipped away to join us, her eyes bright, saying, I'd rather be here. Beatrice, too weak to travel, sent a stole embroidered with roots breakstone, which I draped over my gown, its weight a promise. The sky was a canvas of hope. The graduation dawn was clear, I was wearing a new gown, and the stole was a banner. Nora drove me to campus, and she teased me, saying, You're a queen today. Her pride a warm wind. The robing area hummed, and Sophie rushed to embrace me, saying, We're here together, word bursts, with her cap askew. As the processional marched, my heart pounded with excitement. I looked around the crowd and saw my parents in the best seats, their eyes on Sophie and Uncle Daniel, standing next to them watching me, his nod a silent strength. As the ceremony continued, they awarded degrees, called my name to courteous applause, and Sophie's thumbs up ignited a spark. Then President Harlan stood up and said, Before we close, we honor extraordinary achievements. Adding, Clara Bennett Business School will deliver the student address. As I ascended the stage, my locket clinging to my chest, my parents' confused expressions faded into the distance, and my voice soared. 4 years ago, I arrived with nothing but determination and was told that I wasn't worthy. I worked 60 hours a week, built a business, and graduated with honors. The applause was thunderous, and my truth swept across the room. Clara Bennett is our valedictorian, a perfect 4.0, while building an agency valued at 6 figures. She won the National Collegiate Entrepreneurship Competition, bringing Crestwood pride. Most remarkably, she did this without family support, self-financing her education, President Harlan said gravely as he returned. The audience gasped a ripple of awe, and my parents' faces drained shock, giving way to shame. Clara has been offered a role at Vanguard Consulting, a top firm. Her story will grace Business Vision's cover, he added. The standing ovation roared, Sophie's tears glistened, and Uncle Daniel's whistle cut through. Harlan's last words were a crown. In Clara's honor, we established the Clara Bennett Resilience Scholarship, aiding students who overcome great odds. The applause erupted, and my name became a legacy. I went back to my seat, Sophie's hand squeezing mine, and she whispered, They were so wrong. The ceremony ended, and families flooded the field. My parents came, their postures rigid. We didn't know, Thomas said in a hollow voice. You've done well. I met his eyes. I've done what I always could. You chose not to see. Sophie stepped beside me. Everyone knows now, she said sharply, and Uncle Daniel hugged me. You're our pride, he said, his eyes fierce. Professor Langston and Dean Carver toasted my journey as I attended the business school reception. Elena Ruiz, CEO of Vanguard, came up and said, Your grit is what we need, with a firm handshake. Sophie watched with awe in her eyes. You're changing the world, and Nora smiled. She's just Clara, our queen. Beatrice's locket hummed her spirit close by. My parents sent me an invitation to dinner, but I went to her lodge with Sophie and Nora. We cooked by the lake with the stars overhead, and Beatrice said, Your mother would dance. I felt her, my heart was aflame. Months later, I began working at Vanguard with a view of the city from my apartment. My agency flourished with Priya running its affairs. I awarded a second scholarship, the first winner of which was a student much like me. Thomas and Margaret reached out, their voices quieter, saying, We're sorry, and can we try again? I thought maybe, but based on truth, not excuses. Sophie and I traveled together, our sisterhood, a river running free. Beatrice passing by, her necklace, my anchor, me as Clara, my value a constellation, my voyage a song, not their approbation, but my own soaring spirit.